I hired my first employee in 1971. And boy, was I scared. How did I know I was getting the right person? And how did I know whether or not they were really going to do the job the way it needed to be done? And through the years, I've continued to try to figure out that formula of how you get the right person in the right job. As a matter of fact, one of the things that's really fascinating to me is I've had the opportunity to speak at a lot of MBA programs, and I always ask them, how many of you have had the class on hiring? Yeah, and the problem is most MBA programs don't teach a class on hiring, and I still don't quite understand why that is. But I've got a couple guests today who are going to help us with this process so that we can all get better at hiring in the process. First of all, Mindy Bortness, who's the president and the founder of Communication Works. Mindy has a background in marketing, and she's worked a lot with helping organizations reduce their turnover. And some of the statistics I've seen from you, Mindy, about how much money you've helped companies save, and really that's another way of saying putting money to the bottom line, have really impressed me. So thanks for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and then next to you, Bobby Sanchez is sort of a victim of what we've been learning about hiring, because I asked Bobby to join us today because he's a relatively new member of the Price Associates team. He's our new chief of staff, and we used our hiring process to decide whether or not he was the right person for the job. So, of course, we know that the whole idea of hiring is pretty complex. There are a lot of pieces to it, but something that you and I have worked with for years that we're so excited about is what we call job benchmarking. So tell our viewing audience a little bit of what job benchmarking is.
Thanks, Ron. I'd be happy to. It's really the diagnostic, kind of like eHarmony for jobs.
Yeah.
Where you, in eHarmony or any of those matching organizations for human to human, you do a diagnostic and you match them behind the scenes. And job benchmarking is the same fundamental process, except that you are looking at the job itself and really letting the job speak to you. And if the job were a perfect robot coming in, what would success look like? And then matching candidates against that role.
So that's the first thing that's really interesting to me, is this idea that you're listening to the job, you said. Because I think a lot of times when we're hiring, what we're paying attention to is the person who's in the job who's getting ready to leave. And it could be what we want to keep about them, or it could be what we want to get rid of about them. So how do you listen to the job in a practical way?
Yeah, absolutely, Ron. Yeah, we think about Sally or Sam, and I want another Sally or I don't want another Sam. And so in a practical way, you get the subject matter experts, so the people who know this role intimately.
So that might be an example.
So let's say we're doing a vice president of sales. And so you might have whoever they report to, because they're the visionary for that role. And then one or two brothers or sisters of that role, or sister relationships to that role. You could even have somebody who reports up to it. But people who would give you a 360 view of what the ideal job would look like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really taking that one step further, if you were doing a sales role, one thing to not get caught up in is having too many of your current salespeople being in that room, because everybody answers that I'm the best and it's got to be exactly like me.
Yeah.
And you could have a C team and not an A team. And we're really trying to build a benchmark as an A team.
Right.
And that's why that visionary is so important.
Yeah, one of the things that the late, great Bill Bonstetter always used to say is that when you have an A brand, you often end up with a B team.
Yes.
And what he meant was that when the brand is so good that salespeople don't have to be that good, you tend to attract mediocrity in sales instead of really high, superior performance.
Yeah, because the brand just lets them float.
Yeah. So obviously it impacts all positions, not just selling. And you talk about this idea of finding out what the diagnostic is of what the job is looking for. What are the different categories that are included in the diagnostics that you use when you create this blueprint for the job?
Blueprint, yeah, great word for it. We can measure roles and candidates, or current employees for that matter, in 2, 3, or 4 sciences. And the more sciences you add, obviously the more depth and detail and accuracy you're going to get. But even 2 sciences is amazing.
So sciences, tell us, what are those sciences?
So one science would be communication style or behavior. What's the behavior of the role? What's it going to do each day? Is it behind the scenes? Is it up front? Is it talking to a lot of people, et cetera? A second science would be the driving force or motivation of the role. What's its heart? Why does it wake up in the morning? What's it going to be rewarded by? So that would be a second science. A third science would be competency, the soft skills. What does this job need an automatic A in? You know, we all went to school, right? And we all have classes that we did really well in and classes that we struggled to get a C. Well, those hierarchy of competencies are the same thing in a role. And all of our roles require us to have a different set of competencies that we use really a lot, or every once in a while, every other Thursday. And so you want to really measure those competencies in the role.
Yeah.
And then the fourth science we can take a peek at is the acumen, the thinking pattern. You know, how does it see the world around it, and how does it see itself within the role? How much does it understand?
And when you say sciences, what you're saying is that there's actually a way to measure these things, first in what the job is looking for, and then a commensurate way to measure these things in applicants. Or can you use this with incumbents? What if somebody's already in the job?
Yeah, absolutely. It can work against a new applicant or candidate and or a person who's already in it, so that you're continuing, because you may have actually great people already in your organization. I mean, it takes it in a different direction, but you may have them already in your organization, and it could be a great human and a great job, but maybe not the right fit anymore.
Yeah.
And doing benchmarking within the organization, you may find that somebody over in marketing would really, really be great in finance, you know?
Well, now I've heard of a lot of companies that seem to approach it a different way. When I hear them talking about benchmarking, what they're talking about is we're going to go assess all the people that are in this job and who are performing well, and we're going to identify what the common traits are in them, and then we're going to go hire against that. Is that what you're talking about, or is this something different?
Actually not. It is different. It is different because in that scenario, you're still only going to be as good as what you've already got.
Mm.
When you benchmark in the way that we do it, you are actually looking for that ideal role. So you're going a little bit higher. And that's why it's so important to have the leader of that role be in there, because they're the visionary. They're the ones saying, hey, here's what I hold for it. Here's what it should look like.
You're not only identifying who you're looking for in the future, but even your high performers, you're giving them a higher mark to strive for in the process. That's great. Yeah. So Bobby, I jokingly said that you've been a victim of this. You went through this process as an applicant. Tell us a little bit about what it was like for you, first of all, to complete the profile that we used to match you against the job, and then what you learned through that whole process.
Well, you know, what immediately comes to mind is that, you know, we're all products of our own experience. And my experience and background was 24 years in the military, and the job benchmarking there and that system and process looks much different than Price Associates and what other organizations put into place. So I was very curious, if somewhat, I guess, anxious to learn what this process was going to be, because at the end of the day, I knew it was all about providing this knowledge that was going to help you to make the best decision that you could, and one that would be in the best interest of the organization.
Right.
And so what fascinated me was kind of this combination, this blended mixture of quantitative and qualitative data that gets put into information, that gets put into knowledge, that it becomes useful to you in the decision making. So all these assessments that I took that provided insight to my talent and my skills and my passion, I found very interesting, because in the military, the passion side of it, or the talent and the skills, is measured much differently. It's measured, you know, can this individual put a bullet on the target? Can they throw the grenade, you know, into the bunker, kind of thing?
Boy, I'm not too excited about this conversation.
And so the qualitative piece really that I found of value is that opportunity in the interviewing process. And I had, I think, 4 or 5 interviews with different members of the Price Associates team, an ability for me to look into Price Associates from the perspective of culture and values, and to have this interaction with members of the team and get into discussions about what does integrity mean to Price Associates, what does respect mean to Price Associates, and what are the beliefs and the behaviors that make up the culture of this organization. So it was very informative and of value to me, as I am trying to determine on my own if this would be a good fit, just as well as the organization is trying to make the same decision.
Yeah, that's great. And so one of the things that happens in this process with a candidate is once we've decided that they're the person that we want to work with, we give them a report that shows how they compare against the job. And one of our good friends, Lori Moffat, refers to it as a success profile because it shows you what success looks like in the job and how you relate to that. And I'm assuming that you use those in your work as well.
Absolutely. And what I really like about it is it actually becomes even more sticky and engaging for that employee. And traditionally, we might do a performance review a year down the line where everybody's like, well, I didn't know that. But when we use these tools, as soon as you're hired or 30 days in, and part of your onboarding process, that new person automatically feels like, okay, my leader gets me. They understand me. They care enough to know about me, and they're setting a benchmark for me of what I can do.
Yeah.
So from day one, you know what the expectations are, rather than a year down the line
We're
where
setting
you're
them up
a
for
little bit
success.
surprised.
Yeah, right out of the gate. I know that because you've done this with a lot of different companies, you probably have a pretty good idea in your mind of who is going to benefit the most from bringing this into their organization. So who would you say is the first person who should give you a call?
Person or organization?
Organizations,
So
yeah.
organizations who are hiring very rapidly and they just need humans, they just need to bring them in, but they're sort of drowning and their HR is drowning, and so they're bringing a lot of people in and turnover is costing them a lot of money. So the trigger would be, we're turning a lot of people over. We think they're good and they're not the right fit. So that would be number one. And number two would be those that are so exceedingly long in their hiring process that we get candidate fatigue. And so they've got a lot of executive time locked in and they're not able to bring the right people in.
Yeah,
It's a little too slow.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought of this, but we have a client that was regularly losing top applicants because the process was too long, and job benchmarking was the way that we streamlined that process so they could get offers out to those top candidates a lot quicker.
Yeah, you have IT processes, you have accounting processes, we have the human process.
Yeah, great. So, Bobby, you went through the process, you were chosen, you got your success profile that shows how you compare against the job. When you got that, how did it impact you? Did you agree with what you saw? Did you disagree with what you saw?
No, those are great questions because all of us, have kind of a unique perspective of us and what we're comprised of. And so when you get detailed feedback from external sources, those become important data points that you can compare those data points and see if there are similarities or trends to, your own self-assessment. And so where I saw the similarity in trends, it was validating to me. And other areas where I didn't see maybe the correlation, I didn't discount it. I think that just informed me that I probably perhaps need to just research that a little more and have a better understanding.
It's part of the ongoing learning process.
Yeah. So no, that's actually probably the best way to say it because, when we think about continuous learning and we talk about benchmarking, what works today probably isn't going to be what works 2 or 3 years from now. And so what I'm fascinated about with organizations that know and appreciate that is how they measure the progress or the effectiveness, the efficacy, if you will, of the benchmarking so that they're continually tweaking it and making adjustments. So they're being proactive in a sense.
Yeah, and I know, Mindy, that you've been really effective using this process to help companies, for instance, that are fast growth or have big turnover issues, or maybe they're not performing at the level that they should be. Maybe they get people into the seats, but the people aren't performing at the level that they should be. A lot of the work I've done has been when a board of directors comes to me and says, we need a new CEO. How do we know who to pick? And I often find that even inside that board of directors, they have a lot of different opinions about who they're looking for as their next CEO. And this has been a wonderful process to bring them to a consensus and actually to bring some clarity to the board around what they're responsible for and how to evaluate candidates based on more than just an immediate emotional response. Have you had similar kinds of experiences working with senior leaders getting positioned into organizations?
Yeah, and what you're touching on there are the key results. And those board members coming in and thinking, well, I think the job is this, and I think the job is that, and I think we really need that. And so you're facilitating they would be your subject matter experts, and you're facilitating that conversation about, well, what really is the job.
Yes.
So whether it's a senior CEO or a senior level, the same process works.
Yeah.
The
And
same
it seems to
process
me in
works.
today's world where talent's harder and harder to find because we just don't have enough skilled people for positions that are open today, that the great temptation we have is just to get somebody in the seat.
Right.
And my experience has been getting the wrong person in the seat is often worse than waiting a little bit longer till you find the right person.
Yeah, very
So,
costly.
Great conversation. If you'd like to contact Mindy Bortness to find out more about her work in this area, you can go to communicationworksinc.com. And if you'd like to contact us at Price Associates, it's price-associates.com. There's no reason why you can't get better and better and better at finding superior talent.